Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to break down a genuinely fascinating 2025 study out of Yale University, recently published in the prestigious journal PNAS. Now, for a long time, doctors have noticed that active patients tend to survive longer and preserve their strength during treatment, but the exact biological mechanism behind that wasn't totally clear. Well, Yale researchers just cracked the code, proving that exercise is quite literally a powerful systemic medicine. So let's dive right into this and look at the actual science behind how movement transforms your internal chemistry.
But before we get into the heavy science and the microscopic battles happening inside us, I want you to ask yourself a very empowering question about your own daily routine. Can something as basic, as accessible, and as simple as a 30-minute walk actually starve cancer cells? By the end of this explainer, you're going to look at your daily movement in a completely different light.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the glucose competition, look at a groundbreaking mouse experiment, see exactly how starving the tumor works, examine the mTOR gas pedal, understand the synergy of muscle and aerobic capacity, and finally, wrap up with exercise as medicine.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the glucose competition, the battle for the body's fuel. Clinically, we've known active patients fare better, but let's look at the why. You can think of it as a metabolic rivalry. You've got cancer cells on one side and your healthy muscles on the other. They're basically acting like rival crews, actively fighting over the exact same loot, the body's available glucose. It is a literal biological tug-of-war for survival and growth.
Moving on to Section 2, the mouse experiment, testing breast cancer and melanoma in active versus sedentary environments.
To prove this biological heist is real, researchers injected mice with cancer cells and fed them a high-fat diet to induce obesity, which usually accelerates cancer. Then, they split them up into two groups. On one side, we have the active mice, given free access to a running wheel for 4 weeks. On the other side, the sedentary mice, kept completely inactive for that exact same 4-week period. The sheer difference in the physical outcomes here is absolutely staggering. After just 4 weeks, the tumors in the sedentary mice grew 60% larger than those in the active mice. And here's a super fascinating detail from the study. They tested this with melanoma too. Because melanoma doesn't typically worsen with obesity, the fact that exercise still suppressed these tumors proves that physical activity inhibits cancer through a general body-wide systemic mechanism. It's not just about reducing obesity.
All right, Section 3, starving the tumor, tracking the stolen loot in real time. So, the Yale team needed to know exactly where the fuel was going. In Step 1, they used a special glucose labeled with carbon-13, a stable isotope that basically acts like a microscopic GPS tracker. Step 2, they introduced exercise. And Step 3 is where the magic happens. They tracked a massive increase in glucose uptake directly into the skeletal muscles and the heart myocardium. The exercising muscles actively hijacked the glucose, severely reducing what was available to the tumors and leaving them completely starved of fuel.
And get this, astonishingly, the researchers found it only took 30 minutes. Just a half hour of movement triggered this massive surge in glucose uptake by the muscles and heart. This is incredible news because it proves you don't need intense, exhausting exertion to completely alter your systemic metabolic environment. Just moving for 30 minutes rapidly depletes the glucose available to a tumor.
Which brings us to Section 4, the mTOR gas pedal, how starving cancer changes its genetics. This glucose theft isn't just about depriving the tumor of energy. The gene analysis in the study revealed that exercise actually altered the expression patterns of 417 distinct genes related to energy metabolism right within the tumors themselves. The environment literally forced the cancer to rewrite its own genetic behavior.
And the most important genetic shift involves something called mTOR. You can think of mTOR as a key signaling molecule that acts as the biological accelerator pedal for cell proliferation and growth. By starving the tumor of its glucose fuel through exercise, the levels of mTOR within the tumor dropped significantly. So, exercise effectively forces the cancer to take its foot off the gas pedal, directly suppressing the cancer cell's ability to multiply.
Next up is Section 5, synergy of muscle and aerobic, the ultimate biological defense system.
To pull off the perfect metabolic heist, your body uses two different physical traits working together. On one side, we have muscle mass. Having a higher volume of muscle increases your body's overall physical capacity to act like a sponge and absorb glucose. On the other side, we have aerobic capacity, or VO2 max. This is what allows your body to actively compete and efficiently steal that glucose away. In fact, the Yale study found that mice with a higher VO2 max suppress tumor glucose uptake even more effectively. It is a really powerful 1-2 punch.
Finally, Section 6. Exercise as medicine, preventing sarcopenia and fighting back. So how do we apply these microscopic battles to everyday human health and cancer prevention? Well, we have to talk about sarcopenia. Sarcopenia is the loss of muscle mass that often happens as cancer progresses or as patients undergo heavy treatments. When patients stop moving due to intense fatigue or side effects, their muscle mass shrinks. As we've learned today, losing that muscle mass means you lose your glucose sponges. This unfortunately shifts the metabolic advantage and the glucose supply right back to the tumor, creating highly favorable conditions for the cancer to grow.
So what's our action plan based on the data? It's remarkably straightforward. The most biologically logical approach is to combine basic strength training to build up that muscle mass capacity and aerobic exercise to actively steal the glucose. But the incredibly empowering takeaway from this research is that combating this doesn't require extreme workouts. If you're currently completely sedentary, even just walking a few times a week yields highly significant benefits. There is absolutely no need for highly intense or specialized gym routines to trigger this metabolic heist.
There's a quote derived directly from the clinical approaches recommended by the study that perfectly captures the thesis of our explainer today. Exercise is a medicine that can reshape the tumor microenvironment from an energy metabolism perspective. Physical activity isn't just a nice wellness tip. It is a literal prescription. It's a medicine that actively and aggressively reshapes your internal environment, effectively cutting off the supply lines to disease. Which brings us right back to you. We've seen the data, we've seen the 417 genes that change, and we've seen those tumors shrink by 60%. So, if just a 30-minute walk can rewrite your metabolic environment and literally starve disease, what steps are you going to take today to feed your strength? I'll leave you with that thought to consider as you step into your day, hopefully with a newfound appreciation for every single move you make. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep moving.